All right. Hey, everyone. I am super excited to have Christina Mattison with us today. So, Christina is a heart centered leadership coach and retreat host for women in military leadership. So, she also is the host of the Leading with Heart podcast, which we will definitely talk about a little bit towards the end because women support women. But she also has other hats to include a major in the Air Force Reserves, a wife and a mom of two kids, two young kids, a 500-hour certified yoga and meditation teacher, and a leader of the Strong and Resilient Women online community. Her mission is to empower leaders in the military community to take excellent care of themselves so they can show up as their best selves and lead present and joyful lives, which is something I totally resonate with. So I absolutely love that. So, hello, Christina.
Hello.
I'm so excited, like I said, to have you here because today we're going to be talking about the core values and how they influence identity, behavior change, and leadership. Because I know that is one of your main things that you talk about, right?
Yes, yeah, I'm definitely like identity focused in the way that I support my clients in behavior change. So rather than like setting a goal of losing 20 pounds or setting a goal of achieving this specific thing, we focus on shifting their beliefs around themselves and then following that up with systems and actions that support that identity.
Okay, that's really cool. And I think that is something I feel like no matter what industry you're in, that is something that you should, definitely work at. So, why are values important?
So I think a lot of the times when we're raised by our parents or our caregivers, or we grow up in a certain school, a certain culture, we have these values that are instilled in us that come from someone else. And sometimes those are helpful and sometimes they are not so helpful. And so, what I've found in working with a lot of the women in my community is that they have been gifted, air quotes, these values that really don't resonate with them at a deep level. And so they feel this constant sense of friction, this constant sense of anxiety, or like just the puzzle piece is not fitting for some reason. And that can manifest in depression, a feeling of unfulfillment, a feeling of just constant frustration. And when we do values work in my programs or with my one-on-one clients, it's like their eyes are just opened all of a sudden to these things that they've had within them all along, but they've never really taken the time to dig up, acknowledge, and start manifesting in their lives through actions and decisions and behaviors. And so, knowing your core values will help you in so many ways, whether it's making big, hard decisions in your life or deciding how you're going to prioritize your time, which is probably very limited, and anchoring your goals or your career path or an intention that you have in your life to deeper meaning so that you have a deeper sense of a why rather than just going for those surface level accolades or goals, New Year's resolutions, whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that is so spot on. I mean, when you said with the whole why, one thing that comes to mind for me is I don't know if you know Simon Sinek, but he's really big on,
Totally.
well, like find your why, start with why. So, how can we discover our own personal core values?
So it's going to take the first thing you need to set aside is time. It's not something that you can just quickly blow through and say, oh, yeah, these are my core values. I'm going to go on my merry way. It's going to take some intentional reflection to set aside some time to dig deep, to look at yourself, to ask some reflective, introspective questions. And giving yourself an opportunity to explore a little bit. And so one of the things that I have my clients do when we first do values work together is I sit them down with a list of values. I borrow the list from Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. She has a really nice inclusive list of core values that most people will resonate with. And that's not to say it's like all encompassing, but it covers many of the core values that come up for folks. And so we'll sit down with that list and I'll ask them to go through and circle the ones that they really resonate with. And then we go through an exercise together where we group these values together in ways that they relate to each other in the mind of the client. And from there, I'll ask some questions. We'll do some digging. I'll ask them some why type questions. And eventually, they'll have 2 to 3 core values that kind of rise to the surface of this list. And so if someone listening is like, well, I want to figure out my core values, definitely take some time to sit down with a values list and go through an exercise that will help you in identifying and kind of pinpointing those values. And one caveat that I will make is that it's important to recognize what are the should values and what are the actual values, because the should values are the like, well, this should be my achievement should be my core value, or ambition or courage or integrity should be my core value based on my military experience or based on my career field, or et cetera, et cetera. And give yourself permission to check the shoulds at the door and give yourself an opportunity to actually identify, no, these are my true core values, and I'm going to let go of these shoulds. That doesn't mean they're not important to me, but maybe they're not my like number one, number two core value.
So I agree with the whole should, right? Like the whole achievement like should be a core value. I know, especially like with us in leadership and especially in the military. So how can we overcome that deciding factor of what should be and then what truly is a core? Like what essentially is? How can you overcome those should?
I think it's important that you check in with your body as you're going through these exercises. A lot of the time, your body will give you information. And what I mean by that is if you think about this core value of achievement and you're like, well, I should want to climb the career ladder, but you've got like this clenching in your stomach, or you feel like this tension is in your chest as you consider, what would my life be like if I prioritized this core value? Kind of play out your life if you were putting that value first above all else. And does that feel good, or does it feel kind of icky? Does it feel kind of uncomfortable? Do you feel itchy? Do you feel tightness? Do you feel tension? And then reflect on, there's this other core value that I feel drawn to, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to have this core value, or I'm not sure if this is truly my core value. And then again, play out the next couple of years of your life if you were prioritizing this other core value, maybe like joy or adventure or contentment. What would life look like if you were prioritizing this one and making decisions based on this value, and see how that feels in your body? And if there's a sense of like openness, or there's a sense of relief, or there's a sense of lightness, then that is more than likely indicative that you're on the right track. So tune into your body and listen to it. And then also recognize where some of the shoulds may come from. Is this a value that was instilled in you from your parents? Was it something that, a former boss was like, you should prioritize this, and you feel this sense of obligation to it? Or is there a choice? Like, this is my personal choice, and I feel aligned with this choice and I feel comfortable with this choice. So recognizing the difference between an obligation and a choice, I think, is the other part of it.
I could definitely see that. And because I think like with us, like we tend to have that mindset, like it is hard to overcome, and trying to get into our feelings, especially with like achievement and, you know, tuning in. I think it is something it's a little bit harder for women because we do tend to put other people first and other things before ourselves. So do you think it would be better to like write out core values, or do you think like speaking it out to like you like a coach or speaking it out into existence? Because I know like for myself, like if I say something in my mind, like I could easily shut it off. Like I'm not putting it into the universe or whatever. And I know there's some psychology behind actually writing out like certain things. So as a coach, what do you think is the best way to kind of really tune into those values?
So I'm going to give you an answer that you'll love. It depends.
Yeah.
It really depends. I think it depends on the person. Some people really resonate with writing. Like writing is just such a meaningful activity to them. And I agree that there is power in the written word, and putting pen to paper can be an important exercise in and of itself. But some people, especially I've worked with a couple clients like this, they get in their head, they're trying to perfect it as they're writing it, and they're very much falling into this perfectionism mindset or all or nothing. And so they're getting stuck, and they start avoiding the journaling prompts, and then they come to the next call and I'm like, "Did you do your homework?" And they're like, No, I didn't." And so it depends on the person. Some people really do well with writing assignments, and then some people really need that like conversational approach. They need the support of a coach or a therapist or a trusted friend or mentor to pull the thread and to ask some additional questions. So I think, just recognizing, hey, what works for me? Do I work better with a conversation? Do I work better with kind of like more of a motivational interviewing type approach? Or am I better on my own, where if I take my journal and I sit outside or I sit in a quiet room and I do some reflecting, I know that I will come to the answer on my own.
You mentioned the whole perfection of trying to find your values, and I know that is probably something that I would probably do. Like, how often should you review your values?
That's a great question. I think that it is worth coming back once a year at least, not necessarily with the intention of changing your values. Your values may shift over time, especially as you go through significant life events, um, getting married, having children if you choose, or starting your career, or maybe after a significant traumatizing incident in your life. Your values may shift in response to a significant event, but most of the time, your values will stay fairly consistent throughout your life. That it's not something that is constantly changing. So, what I would say is take some time each year, whether that's at the beginning of the year or the end of the year, or maybe you have a significant date throughout the year, and come back to them and ask questions like, how have I been living into my values lately? How What decisions have I made recently that aligns with core value X or core value Y? Do I need to adjust any of these values? Do I connect more with a different value? Because I will say, when I first did a values elicitation with the first life coach that I'd ever worked with, we uncovered two core values in me. Joy and peace were my core values that were actually at my core. Whereas I was at the time living into values of accomplishment, success, and achievement. And so that's why I was dealing with all of this anxiety and a sense of unfulfillment in my life, because all of my decisions, behaviors, and actions were not aligning with my core values. However, a couple years later, after I had done a lot more inner work, I'd done more therapy, I've done more introspection and personal reflection, I went back and I did the values exercise again. And I was actually able to pull the thread and realize that love and peace were second tier values for me. And they supported other core values, which came to be making a difference is one of my core values, and growth is another one of my core values. And so peace for me comes with making a difference. I feel a sense of peace, but if I'm not making a difference, I don't feel a sense of peace. And then, joy supports both of those core values. I get joy from making a difference, and I get joy from personal growth when I feel like I'm growing. So I think it's worth revisiting regularly, every year or two, to ask the question, is there something deeper? Is there another core value at the center that would better describe what I want to prioritize in my life? But then also asking those kind of annual review questions of like, how am I living into this? What actions am I taking? Is there some place that I need to adjust? Am I misaligned in certain areas of my life and I need to get back on track? I need to make this change. I need to make this change. I need to eliminate this relationship or this bad habit to get more aligned and more on track with following this path that leads towards my core value.
I love that. So you kind of already tapped into it, but kind of explain a little bit more like how we could utilize our core values for more intentional living.
Absolutely. So I think once you have them identified, your core values, I like to use values in a lot of the subsequent exercises that I do with my clients. Typically they've come to me because they want to experience something different in their lives, and they need to shift their behaviors and mindset in order to make that transformational change in their life. So let's say a client comes to me and she is overworked, burnt out. She's a total perfectionist. She's got black or white, all or nothing thinking. And so she has been putting herself on the back burner for like a decade. And now she's completely burnt out. She's at the halfway point of her career before retirement. And she's like, I don't know if I can make it to retirement. I would like to because my service is important to me, but I don't know if I can make it because right now the cost is not worth it. And so one of the first exercises we'll do together is a values elicitation. And through this exercise, we maybe uncover that integrity and family are her core values. And so the reason that she's been feeling so awful is that she's out of integrity with herself because she keeps canceling the commitments that she makes to herself. And she's spending all this time at work and she's not prioritizing her family. So no wonder she's feeling upset. She's feeling anxious. She's feeling depressed. She's feeling detached. She's feeling all these uncomfortable negative experiences because her life is reflective of core values that aren't hers. And so from there, the more like tangible applications that we can use for these values is kind of taking a life inventory. Okay, let's look at work. Where in your work are you aligned with these values and where are you misaligned? Okay, let's look at home life. Where are you aligned? Where are you misaligned? Let's look at your wellness, your holistic well-being, your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health. Where are you aligned? Where are you misaligned? And so we kind of go through this exercise to see where there are opportunities for change, where, there's maybe some low-hanging fruit, maybe there is some opportunity to make some impactful small changes, sometimes big changes, but I like to start small. And then from there, we develop, to be cute and use a military term, we develop some lines of effort. So we use these values in order to create their identity statement, which is kind of this personalized affirmation statement that we use during our work together. And it's meant to aspire to the type of person that they want to become. And so from there, we develop these lines of effort of, okay, here's this identity statement. Here's my North Star. Here is the person that I aspire to become over the next 6 months to a year. And then we look at what areas of my life do I need to change in order to better become that person. Okay, line of effort number one, I need to better prioritize my physical health by going to bed earlier and by exercising regularly. And then I need to take care of my mental health by I need to start working with a therapist, and I need to develop a morning routine. My spiritual health, I need to spend regular time in nature, and I want to do a daily devotional. And so from there, we will look at those different behaviors that help with those lines of effort, and we'll figure out ways to implement that in their lives to make shifts and changes. We use some strategies from the book Atomic Habits. We use some strategies in the book Dare to Lead. And then we use some more like somatic strategies that I've learned in like my yoga teacher training and meditation training. And we kind of combine all those things together over the course of several months to help them build systems around these behaviors that ultimately better align them with their values. So the values is kind of like the base, the foundation, and then from there we build the identity statement. From the identity statement we build the lines of effort, and then from the lines of effort we build the habits and systems that support them in aligning themselves with those values in regular, consistent ways in their lives.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned Atomic Habits because, one, I think that is a great book that everyone needs to read because it was almost
100%.
mind blowing, like what some of the things he says, because these habits do influence our behavior. So, how can we influence behavior change using our values?
So I think one of the things is to identify a behavior in your life that you'd like to shift. So kind of looking at, the values inventory, where in my life am I feeling misaligned? Okay, what do I need to change in order to bring me better into alignment with my values? So let's use another example. Let's say that this imaginary client from earlier who's feeling very burnt out, she is regularly canceling on her commitments to herself. She feels the need to prioritize everyone else's needs before hers. And asking her to all of a sudden abandon this behavior pattern that she's been, maybe practicing her whole life to, well, you need to take care of yourself. You need to like drop all this taking care of other people and focus on yourself for like 6 months. That's not realistic. And it's going to end up in disappointment. It's going to end up in failure. She's going to be frustrated. She's going to fire me. Like, it's just not going to go well. And so what I will ask her to do is identify one thing that she can start doing for herself. And what I typically look for is, what's your high yield self care? And what I mean by that is, what self care activities give you the highest rate of return for the amount of time and energy that you've invested into it? And so sometimes we're practicing self-care that doesn't really work for us. We think we should be we think we should be taking bubble baths or getting our nails done or getting a massage, when in actuality your high yield self-care, unbeknownst to you, is spending time in nature and alone time. Like, maybe when you are alone and you get to do something that's completely for you, it really rejuvenates you at a faster, more effective level than going and getting a massage would. That's not to say that massages are bad. They're great,
Oh, they're
but it
amazing.
may not be your high yield self-care. So once we identify some opportunities for high yield self-care, and looking at the different pillars of wellness in their life, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, I will challenge them for, X number of days. I want you to do one thing each day that helps you prioritize yourself. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes. I want you to figure out an activity or a behavior or your high yield self-care and spend 5 to 10 minutes doing it each day over the next like 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing this pre-work around values, this foundational work around, okay, my values are family and integrity, I'm getting after the integrity value. I want you to show up for yourself for 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks, and then let's talk about it. Let's reflect, let's review, and see how it went. And so by making these small adjustments, small changes, and allowing them to engage in very small doable behaviors, we can start to see what works, see what needs to be adjusted, take some time to reflect, but we start to build up this consistency. And there's this concept in the book Atomic Habits where he talks about casting votes. And when you have this aspirational identity of who you want to become, a person that's living into their values, a person that is aligned, a person that is content or in integrity with themselves, or is regularly prioritizing their family, if you are regularly casting a vote, no matter how small, you are building new neural pathways in your brain that lead to the belief or the knowing that I am in alignment with this value, because look at all this evidence of what I've done over the past month, 2 months, 6 months that aligns with this value. And so then you start to have this sense of, I am living into this and I am taking regular intentional action to cast votes for this value and this person that I want to be.
So you mentioned, and I know we talked about this kind of earlier on too, like how we always put other people in front of us, right? Like with women, we're caretakers. How do you work with your clients on getting over the guilt of trying to find self-care for themselves?
Such an important question, because our culture, along with being a woman, has really instilled this sense of, if you do anything for yourself or if you take time for yourself, then you should feel guilty. It should feel selfish. Like you should always be in caregiver mode. You should always be putting others first. Meanwhile, men are not by any means expected to always be taking care of others. It's totally okay if they are climbing their career ladder and, putting their family third, fourth, fifth on the list of priorities. No one cares if men are taking care of themselves. But when a woman does it, it's like, oh,
Oh
how
yeah,
dare
and
you?
that
How
mom
selfish.
guilt is real.
Yeah, the mom guilt is totally real. And if you don't think that's still the case, I was just watching a video on Facebook the other day, and the mom shaming in the comments was insane.
Mm-hmm.
Insane. Based on other people's personal perceptions, personal experiences. Oh, well, back in my day, I just gritted through it and I just dealt with it. And I'm like, well, yeah, and that's why this new generation is all in therapy. Thank you very much. And so I
Yeah.
think when it comes to this sense of guilt and shame around taking care of yourself, we need to go through this process of redefining and reframing what self-care is and what self-care is not. And so for you, maybe I'll use myself in this example. I'm very easily overstimulated, like
Oh, me
by
too.
sound and by just activity and being touched. I'm very easily overstimulated. And so I have 2 small kids. I spend a lot of time being overstimulated.
Mm-hmm.
So in this situation, I could, let's say it's evening time, it's like 5:30, it's dinner time. Everyone's screaming and nobody wants to eat the dinner that I've prepared. And I've been like, I'm touched out, it's loud, my kid wants to play music on the Amazon Alexa in the kitchen, and I'm just like, I am about to lose it. So I have 2 choices. I can put my own needs away and end up probably yelling probably being very impatient and irritable towards my children. And we have a very unpleasant bedtime routine where like I shove them in bed and I'm like, I don't want to see you until tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can recognize I am overstimulated. What do I need right now? I need 10 minutes alone in a quiet, dark room where I can read a book, I can do a meditation and not be touched. Nobody says mom. Nobody asks for anything from me for 10 minutes. And so I'll look at my husband and say, I need 10 minutes. And he's like, go. I've got this because we've had this conversation. He knows this about me. So I choose the path of taking care of my needs. And at the end of that 10 minutes, I am calm.
Mm-hmm.
I am less overstimulated. I am more patient. I am less irritable. I am less angry. And I'm able to now give my kids the bedtime routine that they deserve, where I am loving, I am kind, I am patient, I am present. And so the reframe there is if I take care of my needs, then I am able to better show up for the people in my life that I care most about, whether that be my spouse or my partner, my children, my fur babies, my team at work, the people that depend on me. I am able to show up as a better version of myself, a more grounded, patient, centered, kind, and connected version of myself if I take intentional time to meet my needs on a regular basis rather than waiting until I'm burnt out, I'm like absolutely having a meltdown, rather than this like reactive approach to self-care where we wait until the poop hits the fan and everything starts breaking down. What if you took a more preventative approach and you took regular time each day? And so that's really hard to accept at the beginning for a lot of my clients. They're like, but.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, I hear you. What's the cost of not doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And then who benefits when you do take time for self-care? How are you different? So helping them connect like the second and third order effects and kind of play the movie, if you will, of who are you going to be if you continue to do these old patterns of behavior that you came to me in the first place to solve?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you going to be if you make this change? Let's think about the potential outcomes if you take regular time to be a little bit selfish and to take time for yourself and to practice your high yield self care. How will you be different? And
Mm-hmm.
is that worth it to you? And most of the time, they'll come back and they're like, yeah, yeah, I'm really stuck in this old mindset, but I'm going to regularly keep reminding myself of this reframe until it
Mm-hmm.
sticks. And it takes some time. You know, sometimes it takes a lot of time to fully overcome those old stories around self-care and taking care of your own needs and saying no and setting boundaries and not always giving of yourself to others. We all know the old adage, like you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
But yet we still keep trying. We're like
Mm-hmm.
squeezing the washcloth to get like that last
Yeah.
couple drops out. But what if instead of thinking of a full cup, we were regularly trying to get to like a half to three quarters of a cup? And we're like just pouring a little bit in it at a time. And then, you know, maybe every once in a while your cup does get full and you feel this sense of like overabundance. You come back from a retreat or a vacation and you just have this like joy about you. And then what kind of person are you for the
Mm-hmm.
people in your life? And so I think it really comes down to mentally redefining self-care and taking time for yourself, knowing your needs, meeting your needs, and showing up for yourself regularly and seeing how that shifts who you are as a person, as a mother, as a friend, as a wife, as a whatever roles you have in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you also mentioned saying no, and I think that's also a problem that a lot of women have, right?
Yep.
Like again, people pleaser, always putting other people first. So saying no, I think that's going to also take some time too, right? Like what do you tell your clients when they're like, well, I don't know if I could say no?
You know, I think It depends on the situation. I think there are some times where it's not productive, or it's we really don't have an option. We have to say, as like military service, you get tasked for a deployment. You can't really be like, well, no thank you, that doesn't really fit in with my priorities
Yeah.
right now. Like, that's part of what you signed up for. I get
Mhm.
it. There are some extenuating circumstances, but it's what's expected, and we have to say yeah. But do we have to say yes to being, the Air Force ball chairman? Do we have to say yes to this extra additional duty? Do we have to say yes to taking on more work? Do we have to say yes to having our kids in like 6 different sports all at once? Do we have to say yes to all the social agenda activities? No, we don't have to say yes to all those things, but we feel this sense of obligation. I actually taught a class about this the other day, a couple weeks ago, where we talked about the different personalities that struggle with boundary setting. One of them was the people pleaser.
Mhm.
If I don't say yes, then I'll let people down. I will, yeah.
Yeah, that's
um,
me.
People will be disappointed in me. People will be upset with me. They won't love me. They'll feel like I don't love them. So that's one example of the personality. There's the superwoman that believes that they can do it all. That they're like, well, I have to keep up. I have to be competitive. I have to do all the things. Otherwise, it will fail without me. And then there's the FOMO, the FOMO personality of, well, if I say no, I'm going to miss out on something. I'm going to miss out on an opportunity or a fun experience. And so I think when it comes to saying no, it's recognizing, why do you struggle with saying no? What's the underlying belief that is giving you this sense of obligation to say yes? Is it because you think other people's needs are more important than yours? Is it because you feel like you have to, otherwise it will fail? Is it because you believe that if you say no, then you'll miss out? Like, what's the underlying belief that is driving you to say yes to everything? And then it's addressing that belief. It's doing the deeper work, because yeah, we can change surface level behavior. We can read a book about setting boundaries. We can, regurgitate a script of, well, I can't take that on right now because this and this and this. And so there's a ton of resources out there that can help you with more of the tools and the strategies to say no. But I think where you're really going to get into the deeper, more sustained change is where you look at the deeper beliefs, the deeper held beliefs around, what kind of expectations am I putting on myself? What's the story here? Where did it come from? Did I get it from my mom? Did I get it from this person of authority in my life that made me believe that if I did this, then that? So acknowledging belief, recognizing where it came from, and deciding whether that's a belief that you want to keep, or if it's a belief that you need to let go of, or the belief needs to be shifted in some way. It needs to be edited to better support the type of life that you want to live. And when you address the root cause, and that takes time, it's not a quick fix, it's not an easy pill, it's not fun, it's not comfortable. But when you really get in the mess and the muck and the grit, and you do the deep work, then all of the other stuff starts to get easier. You have an easier time with letting go of the expectations of others. You have an easier time letting go of the fear of judgment from other moms or other women. You have a better sense of self, so that you can believe, you know what, I am worthy of my own time too. Instead of, I don't deserve this, or I can't rest until everyone else's needs are taken care of. Like, I'm lazy if I take some time to just, sit and do nothing. I must be productive all the time. Looking at these beliefs, I think, is where we really can start to address the deeper stuff that we've been holding on to for years and years and years, and start to either rewrite or undo or let go of the beliefs that no longer serve us.
So one thing that kind of resonated with me, because I'm a strength and conditioning coach, so I do the realm of fitness and, whatever. So everyone wants that quick fix, right?
Yep.
If they don't get that instant gratification, they lose motivation. They always start off like gung ho. I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to eat healthy. And then, like a couple weeks, go by, the novice of it goes to the back burner and then they go back into the old habits. So you mentioned like having to do the work. It's not going to come right away. So, how do you tell your clients to stay motivated, to stay determined, to do the work the long time? Because I mean, like I said, we're in that instant gratification phase of society. Like, if it ain't happening in 2 seconds, like, I ain't doing it.
Yep, we want the 2 weeks to fat loss. We want the diet pill. We want the, oh, if you just the P90X effect. If you just, buy these DVDs, then you'll be ripped. And, you work out every day and just be disciplined and be motivated and you'll get the results that you want. It's such a toxic culture. It's all profit based. It's all like fear mongering and I want to sell you something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not popular to say, no, you're going to have to really do some work. You're going to have to do some inner work. You're going to have to change your beliefs. You're going to have to reprioritize your time. Nobody wants that at first. They want the quick fix because we as an American culture are conditioned to having everything we want at the touch of a button, at the snap of our fingers. We are very much a short-term gratification society. Where the magic happens is when we play the long game. And I'm sure you know this as a strength and conditioning coach, where it's helping people to realize it's not going to be a quick fix. If you truly want the long term, if you really want to get strong, if you really want to lose the weight and keep it off, then it is going to involve some deeper shifts, some fundamental changes in what you believe, in what you prioritize, in the choices you make. And it's going to be hard. You're not going to want to do it on some days. And some days you're going to want to give up. And so this is what I really like about Atomic Habits and that approach is that first he takes the identity portion of it. And so it's like, well, why do you want to work out? What's the deeper goal? Is it about losing weight? No, it's actually about being able to play with my grandkids. It's about not dying at 55 the way my dad did. It's about, being able to hike at 60 and 70 and be out in nature and go on adventures and not be confined to a wheelchair. That's actually what I care about.
Mm-hmm.
And when you pull the thread on those things, it's no longer about what size pants you wear or what the scale reads. It's about how you feel in your body and the kinds of things that your body is able to do for you. And when you take that identity-based approach, when you take that, here's why it matters to me approach, well, then you build a system around that. And you look at the system rather than the outcome. Because when you focus on the system, it gives you this sense of consistency. And the goal is to not break your streak. And when we focus on the system, we're having to overcome these all or nothing mindset blocks that many of us deal with. We're having to recognize that not every day is going to be 100%. There are going to be days where it's like, all I can give today is 2%. That's all I got. But 2% is better than 0%.
Yep.
And getting up and going for a 10-minute walk is better than totally giving up on your day. Or can you do a minute of push-ups and a minute of sit-ups? Can you go to the gym for 15 minutes if you can't get a full hour? And prioritizing consistency over intensity, I think, is where we really start to build that sense of discipline, that sense of, I'm going to show up for myself no matter what. I'm going to prioritize this thing because it's anchored to that deeper meaning. It's not just about the scale. I'm not seeing results fast enough. When you approach it from that identity perspective, then the results take a back seat to the deeper why and what's really important to you. So I would say, if you're listening and you have this goal, I would ask you, why does it matter? Why do you care? Why is it important to you? And then ask the question again. Well, why is that important to you? Well, why is that important to you? What do you actually want? And follow that thread and get to the end where you're like, well, what I actually want is to love myself. Well, what I actually want is to feel comfortable in my skin. Well, what I actually want is to not be in pain every day so that I can play with my kids, so that I can be in a better mood, so that. Think about those things and print them out, put them on their wall, put them something where you can see it every day, whether that's an identity statement or a mantra or some pictures or, some sort of like inspiration board of like pictures of things that you care about, and put that somewhere where you'll look at it every day and be like, this is why I'm showing up to the gym. This is why I'm prioritizing my morning routine. This is why I'm turning on Netflix and I'm going to bed, or turning off Netflix and going to bed. Or this is why I am going back to school. This is why, this is why, this is why. And keep coming back to that anchor point rather than being buffeted around by it's not happening fast enough. I'm not getting the results that I want quick enough. I'm not enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not performing enough. I'm not producing enough. So I'll just give up. Instead, you keep working towards that North Star and prioritizing behaviors and systems that move you toward that North Star, move the needle toward that end goal and what you want.
Yeah, I think this is why I love that you're on this with me, because you and I are very similar with our almost like coaching techniques. Like, you dive a lot more into the whole understanding your why, your identity statement and stuff. I briefly start off with that. But because you're so right, like, you have to dig deep into, why are you doing this? Why is it important? And doing that work, and I know, like you said, Atomic Habits in that identity statement, and then Simon Sinek's to start with why. It's always keep asking yourself, keep asking yourself, keep asking yourself. So I 1,000% love that you do that more on a deeper level and trying to figure out those core values. You're making me like motivated to do this. Like, right after I get off, I'm like, oh, I haven't done my core values in like 5 years. So I should probably do that. No, this has been amazing. So what other advice would you give women who trying to embark on this journey on trying to find their, their core values, their North Star, and just last minute things that you like, big takeaways?
Yeah, so I would say don't do it alone. If you can, get a coach. The best thing I ever did for myself was to get a coach, to have someone pushing me, to have someone asking me those difficult questions, to have someone regularly pulling the thread and asking me why, and helping me see the things that I may have been missing before, and also to give me that tough love when I need it, but also to give me compassion when I need that. So if you can, get a coach. If you're not quite ready for a coach, read Atomic Habits. That book will change your life. Like, so much so that I read it every year. I do an annual book club on it because I'm like, people need to read this book. If you want to have support with the values piece, there is a specific Brittinie Brown podcast episode that I would have people listen to. It's on her podcast, Unlocking Us. If you search like Brittinie Brown podcast values, she has a whole episode on figuring out your core values. She's got a worksheet that goes with it that you can download. So if you're looking for a way to start this values process on your own, I would recommend listening to that podcast and doing the worksheet that goes with it. And then when you're ready, get a coach that can help you go deeper and really take it even 3-4 steps further once you have kind of that initial knowledge and awareness of your own personal values. So I think those would be my 3 pieces of advice. Get a coach, read Atomic Habits, and do a values exercise.
Okay. So you did mention a podcast, and I know you have one called Leading with Heart.
I do.
What can people expect on your podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast launched this in June of 2023. And what we talk about on the podcast is a variety of wellness topics. The goal of the podcast is to give you insights into the pillars of wellness and thinking about some like different strategies. So to give you an example, the first couple of episodes I talk about my core values, I talk about discovering your own core values, I talk about the pillars of wellness, but we also talk about things on the podcast like imposter syndrome, like leading with authenticity, we talk about compassion, we talk about empathy, I just recorded a couple episodes on emotional intelligence. And so the intention is to ultimately help you lead with heart by giving you valuable insights and resources. I have interviews with amazing female service members, technical experts in their career field, leaderships. I've interviewed everyone from like a major to a 1-star. Like I've had some amazing women on the podcast, and the goal is to help you make intentional changes in your life and also connect to the stories and experiences of others to ultimately help you change the narrative around wellness in the military community. And that includes the narrative around wellness with leaders and helping leaders to take excellent care of themselves so that they can take excellent care of the things in their life that matter most.
I love that. That is just amazing. And you mentioned emotional intelligence. There is a book, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I have it on Audible because everything's on Audible. I'll put it on Audible. But I do think, especially as like a leader and truly understanding like yourself and stuff like that, emotional intelligence is definitely up there. It's actually a really good book. If you do want to dive into the emotional intelligence aspect of it, because it would kind of go along essentially with that core value stuff that we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
How else can people find you?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of ways that you can find me. I'm on Instagram at the Military Yogi. I'd love to invite you to join my online community on Facebook, Strong and Resilient Women. You can search it, or I can, share a link to it. You can find me on LinkedIn, Christina Mattison. You can visit my website, ChristinaMattisonYoga.com. You can listen to my podcast. I'm on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Like she mentioned before, it's Leading with Heart. There's all sorts of ways to find me. If you have specific questions around anything that we talked about today, or you're curious to learn more, you're also welcome to email me, hello@ChristinaMattisonYoga.com. And I'd love to connect.
Well, thank you so much for being on this podcast and sharing your expertise. Like I said, I'm like now super motivated to work on my core values. So yeah, any last words?
Just thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the opportunity to share something that I'm super passionate about with your audience. And I hope everyone walked away with at least a little golden nugget to start thinking about and working on in their lives.
Yes, I love it. So thank you again. And until next time, we will talk to you soon.